Alright, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Not live yet, it'll be another 30 minutes before we do anything, but just testing the stream. Gotta go to YouTube, check it out. Let's see here. Alright, looks like we're good. Alright, now what's the link to this stream? Alright, start spinning. Alright, I think we're up. I'm gonna validate here. Alright, yeah, right now I'm sure I'm not if it's live or if I'm just in like a test period. Alright. Where is the link for this?
We don't know how to make each sport is individual. Like you don't do it, but reference was the lone goal and working with just the local like program have to be working on
Alright, I think, pretty sure we're live here. So again, about 29 minutes and good, and we need to share this link. So, trying to figure that out. Normally Jason does all of this. I have to figure it out on my own. Ah, here it is. Found the YouTube link. Alright, here we go, here we go.
We're only like 6 weeks. I think we were first going on. That's a good range. 2 days cooperation. Money's one through the system. But it's more. Are you guys working? I don't know. You have to have it. It's just more of a certain amount of space. Wait. That's the background. Yes, that part. We have to get
Alright, I'm gonna kill the stream. We have the wrong title going up. So hold on, everyone.
Are you looking for more like a one-on-one okay for a 15-year-old? Oh yeah, he does like 3 matches a day.
It might be working. It's probably just a cache thing on Google's end. Right.
So it's important about the audio. You have to use it. just drop it in perspective. I think it's more like because they get a certain rate before they can rent higher level games. I just like that whole idea of like after you being certified for like on little dog also. I think it's also just for those. Nothing is that's the buildings where they see there's a lot of roving bands of levels which we have. So it's like I'm here right now. It's like totally
how are we doing on battery? Not so great. Alright, let's figure this out.
Chinese and Indians they can redesign countries. They have a Pan African organization too. They can redesign education so they make them meaningful. Quickly educated by a combination of on the ground and online. Proper tutoring, proper face-to-face, proper anything. Online is just like books. Another channel that can copy of the book. Knowledge and just because you have books on your head doesn't mean you have that knowledge. So I think it has a chance to use it such a system. Trying to get with essentially Western Looks great, man. Before I may have forgotten. I wanted to
I get your power stuff. Yeah, that'll work.
Sorry, I'm going to move this table a little bit. Excuse me.
We've got a USB cable on the floor, too.
Thank you.
even if it's layered taxonomy plans, and I was thinking, I don't know, I'm not easily.
Actually, you know,
at some point,
Alright, Shim's gonna be interrupted for a little bit. We're gonna be back. Thank you everyone for coming here tonight. We're going to go ahead and get started. All right, thank you and welcome to the 58th Boston VR meetup. Woo! Yeah. So can I get a raise of hands on who has never been here before? Okay, that is awesome. Round of applause for those people. That is awesome. All right. So I apologize to everyone that comes here every month because some of these slides you get over and over, but if people keep coming in new, we have to keep explaining who BostonVR is and what we do. So last month, at the very beginning, we announced, well, we didn't announce, but kind of commented on Altspace going away. And literally the next day, they came back. So yay. So Altspace has been very instrumental in getting BostonVR started. So it's not just the social VR platform. They've done a whole lot for the different communities around and kind of getting them started because they've been around the longest. So BostonVR is not just a meetup. We're a 501c nonprofit, and to get involved, we have a Google group, we have a LinkedIn. If you want to play VR games with other people, you can go in our Steam group. And then Slack, we really want people to start getting involved as to if you need help with anything, you can come in, ask questions, or if you want to volunteer, if you want to talk to me, or really anyone in BostonVR, you can just go to our Slack channel. All right, we also have a podcast, so it's brand new, just came out this year. It's a virtuality podcast, and we cover a lot of our speakers that come in will agree to be on the show. So our most recent one that we have is with Leap Motion, and we have another one coming up with Duncan Ershik from Virtual Life. So what they're doing is taking animals and then scanning them in 3D and then creating models out of them. So he's a biologist, so it's things like sharks. So how do you capture a moving animal? and that's the kind of problems that they're solving. So it's going to be a really interesting one that should be out by the end of this week. But the most recent one you can listen to right now is with Leap Motion and their interaction engine, which they were here in June to present on. And we would like to thank Discover for sponsoring these meetups. It kind of pays for pizza and space, as well as our device library. So if you want to work on a VR project, you can just apply. We have HoloLenses, Oculus Rift, community laptops, things like that. So if you want more information about it, just reach out to me after. And we'd like to thank the CIC for hosting this space tonight. So thank you very much. All right, so first up we have FedEx, and then afterwards we have Scott Greenwald from the Fluid Interfaces Lab at the MIT Media Lab. So they're in the back corner over there once we get to demos. Scott Everdeen with Infinite Stores, you haven't tried it out. It's a virtual marketplace, and like how do we represent these markets in, like what is e-commerce going to look like in VR? Scott has a very cool idea on that, so if you want to try that out, he's over in the left corner. Solid Virtual just applied like tonight, and so do you want to come up and talk about what your demo is? Or what can you tell us about your demo?
We do viability of real estate. It's flat, it's apartment, it's a little jitter, I don't know what happened with the window.
All right, so VR real estate in the back over there. And Eric Bullock with Review Live is going to be over here in the left corner. And did we miss any other demos? Speak now. All right, I think that's everyone. So that's one of the things that's great about BostonVR is you can just show up tonight and demo. So sometimes our demos aren't always on the slides. But yeah, if you're ever working on anything, just come out and get great feedback. Because we're the 6th largest VR meetup in the world right now. So we have a very awesome and thriving communities. And again, with people like you coming in for the first time, really want to thank you. So if you're looking to get into VR development or AR development, academyofvr.com has a free workshop on October 12th. So I'm going to try and get more things like this into our newsletters. So that's just if you're on Meetup, you should have gotten several, but we try to only do it like once or twice a month because we don't want to spam your inbox. But there's just so much going on in our community and just around that I'm starting to send them out more often because there's more and more announcements. So if you don't want to get those, you can actually just sign up on Meetup. And the Reality Virtually Hackathon, I think they're still taking signups. So October 6th through 9th, it's one of the, last year it was like the largest VR AR hackathon ever with over 350 participants. And I think they're looking to even exceed that this year. So if you have a team or friends, go ahead and sign up for this hackathon because it's going to be really awesome. And it's an excellent venue if you've never been at the Media Lab. So I'm really excited about this. There's a new Women in Realities meetup group. So would you like to come up and talk about it, Kathy? Nope. Oh, she's here. Awesome.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Trigolo. I've been involved with BostonVR since last year. As many of us have, we got involved in the VR community relatively recently. But we've started a meetup group that is for women to really encourage the interdisciplinary participation of women who are involved in the technical side of things or in other areas, music, arts, production, anything that would go into creating rich VR or AR experiences. So we've started this meetup group. We have meetings before BostonVR, Boston AR, so that people can do meet and greets. We also are sponsoring other events like Hack the Hack to encourage people to participate in the hackathons that are coming up. So we're adding more programming and developing this meetup group. So please sign up if you're here tonight. This is where we are. You can look for us in the meetup area. And I'd love to talk with you if you have any questions about it. We do have some men who are involved, like who are signed up, who are interested in women participating in the VR and AR community. So you're welcome to be part of the community. We will have some events that are for women only, but otherwise our events are open to everyone. So thank you very much.
If you have any questions, there is an after party at Firebrand Saints, which I think she'll be at. So she'll be able to answer any questions you have about the group. So there's also another meetup group, Boston AR, which is our sister group. And so they also meet once a month, and they focus very much on the business side of augmented reality. They also cover things like sports. If you go through their meetups, they have a different theme every month. It's really awesome. They even did one in healthcare earlier. So they're kind of all over. But just keep an eye on it in case the topic you're interested in comes up. It's really well put together, and they get some of the top speakers in the AR industry to come in, or even Skype in. Yep, and if you want to demo, Neil at Boston, so he's the founder of Boston AR, Neil at bostonar.org. Just email him if you have a project that you want to demo at Boston AR. And again, you can always reach him out on Twitter at Mr. Neil Gupta. So upcoming events on our side is, so we also have Hack Days. So that's where VR creators get together and come in on a Saturday. And we just kind of make projects. So it's not anything intense. It's really laid back. You just kind of come in. There's lots of VR developers there. So if you have questions, you're working on something, you help, anything like that. So that's going to be October 21st. And our next events coming up would be in October on the 23rd, November the 13th, and tentative date on December 4th. We also have t-shirts, so we can also give you a tax credit on that, and the t-shirts are going to be over there. So after these talks, we'll begin selling them, only $15 each. And again, we're a 501c nonprofit, so get a tax credit. All right, and we just like to thank all our organizers that helped put all this together, as far as social media and getting all the speakers here and getting the pizza delivered, all those things. So just a round of applause for these guys. Thanks. And if you want to get involved, again, we have our Google group, and we're always looking for more volunteers to help out. And if you have any feedback on how the meetup can be better, or do you have a speaker you'd like to see, just let us know. And we'll do our best to make it happen and improve things. So we're definitely listening. And again, after party downstairs, it's kind of by your own, but there's plenty of people that, again, like Kathy's going to be there. So a lot of the leaders in our industry, Jeff Bale usually goes, so he's the founder of BostonVR. And you just get to meet a wide variety of people in the community. That's a really good thing to do. So afterwards, seriously, it's straight downstairs, immediately to your left. Firebrand Strengths is the bar. All right, so thank you. And we're going to jump over to our speaker, which is Jonathan Schrack from FedEx Express.
Let's see. Let's think about it. There we go. Cool. So I want to apologize for two things. So you can blame the hot weather on me. The heat wave hit Memphis. It was 98, so I ran off to Boston. Unfortunately, I fell in here. And whenever that happens, I lose my voice. It's about as loud as I'm going to get tonight. All right. So first up, I'm Jonathan Schrack. My official title is Air Operations Division Technical Operations Training Instructor Developer Specialist. Everyone else just calls me that VR guy in Building C. So I'm the primary VR developer for Tech Ops training that we mostly train the mechanics at FedEx Express. And I'm head of the project that is the 767 engine run training. And how I got into VR originally was through a local group called Memphis Game Developers. That's also where they found me and said, hey, you already work for FedEx? Are you doing VR? Great, come on. So first off, a lot of people ask me, it's like, well, I get VR training for pilots, but why mechanics? I'm like, all right, well, you've never flown a plane. I haven't flown a plane before. It's like almost 150, 170 steps just to start the engine. That's what we're actually doing. Now, there's probably a few out there that's like, wait a second. I played Microsoft Flight Sim. It's not that complicated. I'm like, okay, well, we actually care about safety. So it's safety, 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 safety. Check this, make sure no one's standing here, make sure this is safe. So yeah, it's extremely intense. And one thing we've just been, as we've taught years and years of mechanics, is that anytime you have like real high intensity subjects, it needs high fidelity. You need to be able to train them on actual planes, actual simulators. And that's where kind of VR steps in. Now, for those of you who've seen the inside of a plane cockpit, you know there's only like 3 people that fit inside there, right? Well, an average class size is around 20 to 30 people, and FedEx has hubs all over the world of a small army of mechanics. And so that's where kind of the advantages of VR come in. First off, as all here are all VR developers, you know this, it's all consumer ready. I can just walk down to the electronics store, buy a desktop, buy a VR headset, and we're good to go. So that allows us to suddenly say, hey, let's not worry about how this X dollars I can't share with your price tag airplane, and we're going to train mechanics on it. We can just have, hey, try out the simulation, coach them through it, not have to worry about it too much. Next step is kind of data gathering. For once now that we actually have the position of the user's head and their hands, we actually see, like, as they're looking for things in the cockpit, as their hands are going through the motions, where the problem areas are. So what we can see is like, all right, you came down this step where you are looking for example, let's say the P61 panel. No one knows what that means. I didn't know what it means until about 2 weeks ago. It's fine. So now we say, oh, well, you know, you struggle here when you look. Here's my voice again. You struggle here when you're looking around for your power supply. That allows us to identify the problem areas that individual students will have, and we're able to better customize the training for them. Second off, we actually have a classroom setting. As I mentioned earlier, our average classroom is only 20 to 30 mechanics. And if you only get 3 people, 4 people in a cockpit at a time for effective training, then you want to enhance that. You need more efficiency of that. And so now with VR, again, it's easy. I can just go to the store. Hey, we have a bunch of headsets, we have a bunch of computers, ready to rock. So, and as I mentioned earlier, spatial awareness and muscle memory go hand in hand. FedEx does things overnight. We probably have way too many planes flying off at the same time. If you ever watch a video online, you can see the night shift one where it's just a plane, like every go, like every 10 or 15 minutes, another plane's taking off. And so we need things to be fast and accurate. We don't want, if you're fixing a plane or working on it, we don't want you just bumbling around. This is where that spatial memory and muscle memory come into play. If you ever see the inside of a plane cockpit, those are designs that the pilots have everything they need at their fingertips while they're sitting in the chair. They don't need to get up and move around. So that means it's like a full 360 experience just operating a plane. And that goes hand in hand with repairing it as well. So, the one thing I always, anyone else, raise your hand if anyone else here is doing any type of VR simulation training. Yeah, I want to talk to you. So, you've heard this joke. But anyway, if any of you guys step into that realm, you're going to have some middle manager step up to you. You'll always have a wry smile on your face going, well, is this an emulation or simulation? It doesn't matter what you give it, they're going to have some way that, well, it really means this. I have the definitions here, they're basically interchangeable, don't worry about it. So do yourself a favor and come up with a really clever response. Although for the sake of discussion tonight, I'm going to tell you what my clever response is. Emulation is kind of a black box design, where simulation is you're trying to accurately model every possible variable. I like to give the example of a car engine. You're simulating it, you're caring about, hey, what's the ambient pressure, what's your fuel spray, how much force is going into it, what's the engine temperature. The black box is, hey, pedal in, I have some secret mojo under the hood, you don't care about it, engine out. Perfect. So when it comes down to designing this type of VR training sims, you're not always going to use a simulation. You might not always use an emulations. A lot of times you're going to use a hybrid. Now, this is the part where I have to say, like, I can't tell you everything. Obviously, do airplane rules, copyrights, etc. So this is where I just got to stop and say, because planes. And so I apologize if anyone asks me questions, and my answer to you is just, because planes. So also, let's talk about what hardware we use. We did a lot of investigations into, at the time, so we started this project about a year ago. And for this project, I'm not saying this is the end-all be-all. Other projects may or may not be using other hardware. But this was kind of our finding. We first checked out the HoloLens a lot. Augmented reality, it's great, it's cool. But for us, it wasn't really necessary. It was great for when we were in the cockpit, but we needed something to be out of the cockpit. And that required virtual reality. So for this project, we just decided to stay away from that for now. We then checked out mobile VR, and we love the accessibility on it. Just the ability to, hey, you have a phone, slap it in this little headset, you're good to roll. The problem is, it's we didn't have any hand controllers, and that was like one of the #1 features we need is that muscle memory I talked about. And also, it's very low fidelity. Once you start throwing tons and tons of polygons and draw calls at it, the phone will just kind of grind to a halt and overheat. The next up came to the two kingpins of the current market, HTC Vive and Oculus Rift. We love both of them. We tried both of them out in different scenarios. They both, again, have high fidelity. They both have hand controllers. The Vive was more optimized for room scale, whereas the Rift was more optimized for desktop. In our test, we noticed that the Vive was great at dealing with occlusion, but had problems with interference. And the Rift was like the counterpoint to that, great at interference, bad occlusion. And we ended up going with the Oculus Rift for this project. Because again, we needed to have a lot of people in the classrooms just sitting at a desk. Because when we're going through an engine run, a good chunk of it's going to be sitting in the chair already. So room scale was a bit wasted on that point. So again, I'm not saying that we're an all Oculus Rift shop now. Every project we analyze and see which is the better headset to use. And we hope to see as new headsets in our market, see greater flexibility. So this is one of the few pictures I was allowed to show, and I had to strip off the textures for it. So forgive it, it's all unpainted. But this is what I was talking about earlier and have high detail on here. This is just one of the landing gears. And every bolt, nut, spring, if I pan this camera up, you could see individual support struts inside the wings. Everything is modeled, ridiculously high detail. And this is kind of one of the differences when it comes from game design. In game design, you don't want high detail, unless it's absolutely necessary for a player. However, part of our safety checks is that the mechanics to go around and inspect these struts. They need to look for signs of wear, signs for corrosion, safety, safety, safety. So we have to have this level of high detail. And then if you come from a game design world, you're already sitting there cringing and, I don't want to have to deal with all those 1080s coming in now, right? So this is just a design problem you have to be able to juggle your polygons around the scene and deal with. So welcome to the second picture I was allowed to show, and the last picture, sadly. But this shot is from the cockpit. And what I want to highlight in this picture is that this whole picture is from the in-game shot. And we have a little picture-in-picture view. And yes, welcome to the problem no one tells you about in VR, about taking screenshots. It's really hard to grasp the VR nature of it. But in this shot, the player can see about, according to my count, 60 different buttons and over 25 different dials. That is only 1/4 of the cockpit. And as you can see, it goes way beyond the player's head, and probably about out to these chairs on either side of them if this was the actual cockpit. And that kind of reinforces that we do need to enhance spatial awareness when we're training our mechanics. And it's one of the problems in VR is that a lot of people just get used to coming from a flat screen world. They're just sitting in a chair. They don't realize that there's this whole extra panels and switches they have to interact with behind them. But that's one of the advantages that we have when we're in the VR world. So we'll talk a little bit about game design versus training design. As I mentioned, I kind of got my start way back in the original Oculus developer kit days at the Demofest game developers. So I had a lot of experience doing video game design, but when we kind of went over to the simulation training design, we were into interesting design constraints. The number one I'll just sum up with is that what we true to life might not be a good game principles. And the example I want to give is that we have to do all the safety checks, right? Well, in a video game, you wouldn't really care about that. The whole point that's to have fun. You just kind of skip that and move on. Again, like Microsoft Flight Sim. But we need to have those safety checks. That is paramount to the FedEx paradigm is safety, safety, safety. So now again, we're not going to make you spend 10 minutes walking down the course of the plane. Be reasonable here. So other things we kind of run into lately is some design problems. The biggest one I kind of currently see with the industry is the lack of tactile feedback. And I like to call that the small button problem. And it goes kind of like this. In real life, if you're reaching out to press a button, there's a couple of things happening in your brain. You're sighting it in, you're engaging your muscles to go and reach for it. You feel the physical sense of the button, and then your brain says, okay, that's the right button, and put more force on it. Cool. In VR, we have no sense of touch. There is no sense of tactile feedback. And so what we ran into is that, okay, plane cockpit, a lot of the switches and actuators are about 1 inch square. No problem, you can see the button interact with it. We also have a lot of keypads that are smaller than the user's fingertip. And when that happens, they would reach out for the button. However, they can't feel the button. But now they can't see the button because their hand's already halfway out there in space. So how do you solve that? I mean, you all accidentally fat-fingered buttons in your life. Try it in VR. It's a lot harder. So, well, we kind of experiment different ways. I've seen a few other people in the industry come up with their own unique solutions. And there's always different ways to kind of happen. And currently what's been working really well for us is that we kind of engage the player's hand when they get near it, make it see-through, so now the player can see the button. And we also draw a little laser pointer out from it so they can fine-tune and pick it. And so far, that's had a great user acceptance for us. Other examples I've seen in the industry is that when users would go to engage a panel, they would suddenly pop up a magnified version of it. Or they might, if they're using a Vive, have the Vive's touchpad itself switch into the panel so that you have, again, tactile feedback. Although we're eagerly waiting to kind of see what other technology comes to the market to re-enable that sense of touch in VR. So as I mentioned earlier, another problem we kind of run into that high polygon. I challenge you, next time you go and try any type of video game that's got planes or spaceships in it, go look at the landing gear. I can guarantee you, it's probably just a stick with a circle on it. And sadly, in real life, there are not sticks with circles on it. There's a lot of very important things, especially when you're landing, that go there. So, but you guys know, high polygon, you have to optimize around that. It's always just going to be really unique for us. For instance, we have it where we drop level detail when we get far away. Standard design tricks for video games do help in that sense. Another interesting kind of problem we ran into is up-to-date training. Basically means that once you finish your product, you can't just kind of pause it and go into kind of a maintenance cycle. I mean, I literally got emails the other day about, hey, we have updated regulations from the FAA that now all the instructors have to go through and check out their materials. So your project's going to end up having a lot longer lifespan of just kind of iterations of change this, now update this, so forth and so forth. And the last one I want to talk about, as my voice is just dropping out, is what I like to call the Byzantine user. So if any of y'all have ever done an InfoSec, you've probably heard the term the Byzantine node. And that's the idea that there's a hacker or a compromised system on a network that has the literal exact source code to everything, and they know how everything works. So how do you design your security to compensate for that? And in SimTech, I like to call it the Byzantine user because you have actual mechanics that they know how the plane is supposed to work. You always wondered, hey, I'm in a simulation, right? Nothing's going to break. What happens if I try to break it? So you can't just say, like, hey, this will never happen. Now you do have to account for every possible use case. Because someone out there is going to try it. At least our guys try it. And that's good. We want them to experiment that. That way, if they make a mistake, they can see the signs and recognize it and know how to recover. Unfortunately, a lot of the instructors are now going, oh great, here comes Jonathan going to ask us some weird questions about breaking planes again. But hey, it's part of the job. So, that's the end of my short little presentation. Just to recap, consumer grade VR, great. What works for games might not work for sim training, cool. Planes are complicated. So, I have about 5 minutes left of time. If there's any questions, I'll answer you. What's up?
Are you getting the original CAD file from CATIA, or are you translating from the design files on the plane and they work it out?
Because planes. You weren't here when I said it. There's some question due to copyright stuff involving that I can't answer. So I have to just say it because planes. Maybe we can talk afterwards, but unfortunately I can't give an official answer on that one. Other questions? I saw you in the back.
What's the body size? High.
On that strut, I believe.
I'm just going to average the size.
Let's see. I can't give you a hard number, but I would say it's probably in the 100,000 try range for that. But that's pretty ridiculous. So. Sorry? Oh, we cut a lot out from that shot. It was higher when it was given to us.
So you're saying in that strut?
Just in that strut. Yeah, in that strut alone. And there's 3 struts, and the first strut is about twice the size of the back two. Plain stuff. It's complicated.
Overall in the model, though, over $1 million easy?
I don't even want to guess the overall number. Enough that it made our computer cry when we first tried to shove the entire plane in there and we started going back and out of occlusion going through things. So next question, I'm going to say someone over here, a question? Yes.
So when you have the training simulation, do you guys have the ability to set like a broken strut that the person doing the simulation has to fix?
Yes, that's the plan for us, is that the instructor will have its own view, and so while the students going through it, they'll have ways to insert faults into the system. Because that's actually part of the training course, is the main faults that engines will run into, whether they overheat, faults called hard start. I know if my manager or the teacher is watching at home, so they're like, oh my gosh, dude, get the names right. But yes. Right, you had a question back there.
How many female mechanics
How many female mechanics do we meet?
do you meet in the course of talking with all the
Do we meet? I don't know. Stop counting.
you stop counting?
I'll stop counting.
Well, that's crazy.
So,
It's more than zero.
I don't get to meet a lot of mechanics. So I don't. We're still in the development phase, so it hasn't been rolled out to all the classrooms yet. So it's more like kind of like rolling the hallway and like what? You want to try some VR stuff? Just gotta drag it into the room. Why do? What's up?
Have you worked with multiple people collaborating to solve the same problem?
You mean across different industries or just internal?
Sorry, I mean in the simulator, having two people connected at the same time.
Oh, you mean that? That's outside the scope for this training. We definitely experimented with it, but just for this subject, no, we're not investigating that currently. So, what's up?
I think the answer here is going to be because planes. But I was wondering, you gave a good overview of the hardware, but I was wondering if you could tell us about the software that you've used, and if not, maybe how much is bespoke and how much is third-party.
Yes, the engine we're using is Unity, and a lot of that comes from FedEx Express is a C# shop, so it's just natural using your ground programmers in-house. Besides for a few public frameworks, almost all of it's in-house. Yes, I saw you right there.
So, you mentioned like parts of the heating as like possible bad outcomes,
right?
How do you actually like simulate that?
Like how would we show overheating?
Yeah, that something's overheating. That take place.
Right. For that's just part of the training. This is getting a bit how large planes work, but they actually have temperature gauges they have to monitor while they're going through it. And so we're just simulating those in real time so they can see it. And that's part of the training with the faults. They have to recognize when there is an overheat scenario, for example. I saw someone here first, so go with the box here first.
When you're talking about the platforms, you mentioned one was good at interference, the other one not. I'm not familiar with that term actually.
Interference? It's just something we noticed is that with the Vive, at least again in our setup with our classrooms, so other people will have wildly different experiences, is that both the Vive and the Rift work on infrared tracking, and Vive seem a lot more susceptible to infrared interference, whether it was from sunlight hitting through the window or multiple Vive setups in the room. And the Rift seem to handle it much better, at least again. This is our experience. I'm not saying this is a blanket statement or anything. Yes.
So how long does the simulation normally take, and how do you do motion sickness?
We haven't had any issues with motion sickness at this point. As far as simulation, it's like I said, we're still in development, so I can't give you a hard number of how long it takes. Part of that is we're still kind of going back and forth of parts of the engine startup process itself just take a while as you're waiting for the engines to spool up and whatnot. And we're still kind of going back and forth with our instructors of, do we want to make them physically just sit there and wait on it like real life? Or is that one of those things where we could just say, hey, time passes, this is not a new state? So I can't give you a hard answer one way or the other. So these guys first. So yes, Richard.
Hi, I'm curious, does your simulation have sound in it? Like
yes.
Maybe like radio chatter that you had experience as you're checking stuff?
Yes. That's actually part of it, yes.
And like, so they have like a headset, they're like talking in the mic?
That one, just plays.
2 more questions.
All right. I saw you next.
Yeah, so I would assume Boeing does a lot of this already, and then the other question is, how much of this is probably, I know the answer to this, how much of it is like your planes are custom from Boeing, so you can't do, like, are you collaborating with them at all in terms of simulations they might be running?
Because planes. Right. Yes?
Are you collecting user experience data as well as data from the simulation?
Yes. Like I said, we're still kind of in the development stage, but our plan for when we kind of move out to just early user acceptance The military back in, I believe it was the 80s, had created a simulation sickness questionnaire. And you would have them take it before the training and after the training, and that would give you quantifiable numbers to say, hey, their number for sim sickness did not change, otherwise it's good, or if it was a radical spike, you could actually have quantifiable data to plot out.
Are there other things besides motion sickness that you're looking for in terms of confidence or other types of learning impacts?
I don't have a good answer on that because that's where I rely on the mechanic instructors, as they're the ones that are best trained and suited to handle that. So this is definitely, it's a joint venture between us, the software developers, and the mechanic teachers. So they're the ones that are going to be sitting there monitoring that. So if they were here, they could give you a better answer than I could. So
I encourage you to do that.
All right, I'd like to thank you, Jonathan Schrack.
Thank you very much.
All right, I really want to thank FedEx and, of course, Jonathan for coming out. So one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting was the limitations with field of view in relationship to simulations. So normally when you're making a game, like the Vive, the Oculus, the field of view is fine, you don't really think about it, but when you're trying to create a re-representation of the real world and you have the constraint of trying to mimic the real world, the field of view does become a problem. So I would assume that if you are making a simulation, you want something with a wider field of view than what we have currently. And the other thing I want to note is that if you looked at that cockpit, all those buttons, if you're making a UI, you would never put that many buttons there, but because planes have very tight mechanisms, they have to, like, constraints that they're forced to build under, because planes are difficult. You're forced to use skeuomorphism and do a one-to-one recreation of that setup, even though it might not be the best user experience. So that's one thing that would make simulations much more difficult than just creating a plane experience where you just give someone a joystick and move around. So that's one thing to think about as you become a VR developer, if any aspiring ones or ones that are experienced, is just to kind of think about the user experience, because on the web, when we first started out, we would have things like radio buttons that looked just like a dial from a radio that would be the user interface. And today, all of that kind of skeuomorphism type of interactions are all gone. So try and think, what can I do to make the user experience better? Because right now we are in VR, we're just kind of taking the reality to the point where we're just recreating things that we know and just kind of doing one-for-one, putting giant buttons on things. So just something to think about over the next month or two as you develop is what can I do to rethink how I interact with the virtual world.
Yep.
All right, and so Scott Greenwald is our next speaker from the Fluid Dynamics group at the MIT Media Lab. So he recently defended his PhD and should be a doctor any day now.
Thanks. So it turns out my advisor is actually reading my dissertation at this very moment. So pretty soon I will know.
So you're getting 10 drinks of Firebrand.
Let's hope. Password with one hand. Okay, so we are 1-1. Good. You like it? Okay. Good. Great. So, yeah, the last presentation was sort of looking at the special aspects of design for training, and this one's going to be looking more at the kinds of things you might learn at university. So, physics or chemistry or things like that are kind of the target use cases. So the title is The Equipped Explorer, Virtual Reality as a Medium for Learning. So just to kind of give you a rough idea, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. So you have multiple people collaborating. It might be an expert, it might be a peer, and they're in VR. So this is sort of one of the things I've done. I wanted to just give you that kind of starting feel. So you might remember that, let's see, do we have, seems like we don't have sound. So this is from 1991, and if you could hear, the narrative, they're basically talking about all the things that we now find really exciting about VR. It kind of makes you wonder, what happened in falling in love in VR. Kind of makes you wonder what happened since 1991. And there's, basically, it sort of the most major problem was that the hardware was too expensive. The performance was worse. People used to have simulator sickness. Now they basically don't. So now the thing that makes this exciting, people weren't essentially thinking actually realistically in 1991 about distributing this to like hundreds or thousands of students at the university, because a few were thinking about it, but it wasn't realistic to think about it. And now it really is realistic. So that was the topic of my dissertation. So my dissertation presentation was about twice as long, and it's a little bit of a challenge to condense it, so I sort of cut some things out and decided that I would just go too fast through a bunch of things, and if people want to ask, then there should be a little time. So sort of like overall, just framing this, what are the advantages of VR, what are the challenges, this is where you start to see my approach, what tools have to be supported, so think about the learner as someone who uses tools, and can we show that this is really worth it beyond kind of the novelty effect. So do a little background. It's one of the things that I cut quite a bit of. My design framework that I'm proposing for thinking about learning in VR, and the prototypes and tools. There's a bunch of applications I built. Experimental studies, you'll actually see one of those, looking at how people can learn physics in VR, and just a little bit of reflection on what it all means. So basically the paradigm that I adopt is exploratory learning. This means you're basically in control. You hop into VR, there's a bunch of different things you can do. You're interacting with a simulator. The simulator kind of simulates the world, and the world offers many different things you could do. So I'll just mention really briefly some of the advantages from the perspective of cognitive science. Exploratory learning from simulations, I mentioned a moment ago, is something that people have experimented with, but more in desktop situations. And some people in the 90s, for example, experimented with using VR for learning. Like I said, sort of this basic, the roots of exploratory learning are constructivism, and constructivism is something that came about in around 1930, where people said, no, it's like you don't actually learn just by listening, you learn by kind of trial and error and constructing meaning through interaction. And people sort of actually invented exploratory learning when computers came around and interfaces got really complicated, and some people said, people don't really want to read manuals. We should think about how to support their learning in a more exploratory way. Now I think in that domain we've come a lot further and sort of figured out the learnability curve a lot better, but that's where exploratory learning came from. And so, basically, what new domains does this VR bring to the table? You can go places that are hard to access, into a volcano. You can explore different scales, so no one's ever sort of been able to be inside of a cell before, and that can allow you to develop new kinds of intuitions, interacting with remote people as if they were there, a new thing, and also just the sort of ideas related to scale, but superhuman experience. You can move mountains, and that can actually be beneficial to learning. So relevant concepts from cognitive science, embodiment. So when you're in VR and you're kind of holding the controller and you move your head is an input device, your hands are an input device, you're in space. That concept is known as embodiment. Spatial learning is something that's going to be important for math, science, social studies, just critical thinking in general. Cognitive load, very important concept. So when you're, let's say, learning from a textbook, oftentimes you'll have to, let's say, flip back and forth between pages and put things together that you can't see at the same time. That's called extraneous cognitive load. It's not good for learning. VR can actually bring everything together in one place and decrease that kind of cognitive load. Multiple representations are important for learning. Oftentimes to learn them, like I said, you have to look back and forth between different visualizations and then put them together in your head. VR can allow you to put them together in one place. So learning and training in VR, is sort of these high stakes use cases. It's really bad to make a mistake when you're doing an actual surgery. So this was something where it might be worthwhile to pay $100,000 for one of these systems and use that on military and aerospace. So, planes. Planes are a good example because planes, right? Scientific visualization was something NASA experimented with. They had the money, they had use cases where they said, oh, it might be useful to visualize space, let's try it out. Science education was actually something that people tried, despite the practical challenges that I mentioned a moment ago. Someone actually built sort of chemistry and physics use case in the 90s. It was a huge effort. And they sort of drowned in data, didn't know how to evaluate it, and then realized no one could afford it. And also realize that, today, because our hardware is different, some of these results that you'll read say, this didn't work very well, but we think it's because the field of view was bad, it made people sick, etc. And that actually has been borne out in some of the research that we do. So, the equipped explorer. So we're talking about exploratory learning in VR. So how do you break this down? We're going to be thinking about this autonomous learner in a wide variety of environments. How do you begin to conceive of what the methods are for doing that? So I just wanted to provide this kind of overview, thinking about the media that are involved in learning. So one of the ways people break down constructivist learning environments is into these elements on the right side. There's a famous breakdown from David Perkins, and it's sort of these are the things you need in the classroom to learn in a constructivist way. And as you can see, kind of virtuality does all of them at the same time, and this is a huge opportunity. So I came up with my own framework that is inspired by some of the earlier experiential learning stuff, but makes a lot of sense for VR. So exploration, which I also include creation under that title. Collaboration, interacting with other people, communicating. Capture is really important. Taking notes and reviewing. Taking notes, huge part of learning in a deliberate way. The way we all do in college. And review is when you use those things. And so these are kind of 4 types of things that you might want to do. And here's this graphic with way too much stuff in it that kind of will illustrate that. So you have got the additional kind of categories of looking out and looking in and hands-on and hands-off. And this idea that you take, the stuff that you do in the world and you kind of gather it, which is a simultaneous process of capturing and organizing, and then you later can review that. And all of that can be collaborative, which is why the dark faces are looking in from both sides. So just as an example of what I'm talking about, a tool, teleportation, helps you explore. Hands help you collaborate. They're very expressive. You should check it out over there afterwards. A camera can help you capture your environment. So it seems kind of funny at first to capture VR in 2D, but actually it has a lot of advantages. You know how to use a 2D camera. You can look at it outside VR. And this is sort of an example of what a review tool might look like. You have all your pictures and you can look over them, get an overview, and also visit them again. So here's just some of the work that I've done in this area. I'll have to breeze through a lot of it, but here we go. So just we're making a distinction between prototypes, which is an entire application with some interactions built into it, and tools, which are sort of the ideas that the prototypes embody, which can be applied across contexts. And so here are a few examples of things. The upper left, this is what is called perspective panels. So it was an exploration of a way of capturing. So the subject matter was neuroscience. So this is one of the first things I did in sort of room scale 6-degree freedom VR, and it was pretty awesome. And this snapshot you see here shows the idea that you're moving the thing around, and then you save a perspective. And not only do you get that 2D snapshot, but you also can use it as a link to reorient the object to that original position. That was called spatial hyperlinks. And this is that was called perspective panels. This is called spatial hyperlinks. And this is an environment you actually move around. And so rather than just reorienting an object, you actually can then use the image as a hyperlink to move your entire self, and you're kind of on this little platform back to the place where you made this observation you want to save. This was another neuroscience type experience, first experiment with narrative for me, and really first time that I tried to combine 6-degree freedom input, you're drawing in space, and it's a trail of light, and you see how a retinal neural circuit responds to that stimulus. So you have a stimulus that really has 3 dimensions, and this circuit responds to it. And this was a way of exploring spatial data. So it's actually terrestrial data used, for example, in the oil industry for things that not all of us like. Great. So and sort of this is where I moved on to the stuff that I really found more exciting because it's more open-ended. It's so this is based on the electricity and magnetism course, and moving deeper into that area. John Belcher on the right there has taught that course for decades. Not doing it so much right now, but putting advisor on this. So this is what that looked like. And what you can see here today in the demo is actually a much further along version of this original prototype, where sort of the exciting thing was to see field lines in space and also see some dynamics of charges interacting with each other. So they will form configurations that are stable, pretty cool. Thanks, yeah. Great, yeah, thanks. Gabe Fields built that in the summer. So, and making this video was something that Teji helped with. That's also not a non-trivial process to make these green screen videos that are scaled properly, and also have front layers in front and layers behind. So now I'll show you what that looked like later. This is I called Electrostatic Playground ++ because it had more features. So just to okay, the autoplay didn't work, so I'm gonna have to play them individually. Did I just lose my place? How did that happen? Okay. Fortunately, this is too visual for me to just say I'm going to do it without my slides. What if I press escape? When I change, mouse on this desktop, and then change desktops? Nope, got nothing. Could eliminate additional desktops, or I could move this over to that desktop and then press go. Is that the one? Alright, cool. Alright, so now we're a little too far along in the presentation. It's a sign that I should It's a method of review. When you see it next time, you'll get it better. We're almost there. Okay, so I'm going to play these things and visualize this. So this is a plane that allows you to visualize the direction of the field, and it gets really interesting when there's a lot of charges in there. You know that it's going on, but sort of seeing it reacting in real time is pretty interesting and insightful. This is a magnetic dipole that makes the charges spiral. which is very important in a lot of physical applications that have to do with measurement or particle physics. And this is this is a cylinder that shows you the field on a cylinder, but it also shows you a surface integral, which is something that's a little bit hard to gain intuition for typically, and wanted to get that real-time feedback. What does that surface integral look like when you change it rapidly? Another way of visualizing the field in 2 dimensions, and another example of measuring the flux in real time, and yet another example of doing that on a sphere, which allows you to see how that flux depends only on whether charges are inside or outside the sphere. Okay, too much detail perhaps, but so one of the things that came out of all this was the idea of reality integration. So this is basically it was, how do we really use this stuff? It's not enough to go in VR and get some insights. You have to review it. You have to be able to do all the other things, communicate, collaborate, capture. And so I started thinking about what's the generalization of that. And reality integration is sort of the terminology that I use for that. So we'll see more of that as I proceed quickly. So this is how, in general, we have been doing multi-user, where a teacher or a peer can interact with you in real time. So here's an example application. This is an expert.
Yeah. So that is a viral protein that's an enzyme. And this enzyme is what's responsible for the virus to invade the cell by cutting up the mucus so that it can get closer to the cell membrane.
Okay, so I'm going to fast forward all that. So they answer questions, they look at multiple representations.
There's another way to plug it in amino acid. You swipe left on your touch.
So yeah, this was an example of using that for creativity, painting. And I did an experiment. This is one of the things I cut out. Just want to give you a flavor of this. I had people play word games in VR to learn more about whether these simple avatars are actually effective for communication. So you can use your hands, and you had to play charades. So here's what that looked like. All of them are doing rain, and believe it or not, they actually, about 5/6 of them are actually able to guess it quickly. He's repeating and this is raining, okay. Let's get them all started, why not? So yeah, there's actually a bunch of people acting out raining charades. They're all having a great time, and they actually are also successful. Last year at BostonVR, I showed Cocoverse, which is a multi-user application where it was painting, but also many other things, and exploring a big environment. And next, this is a very interesting way of keeping people from running into each other in a setting like that. So they want to be able to move independently in the environment, but they don't want to run into each other. So they maintain this anchor called the avatar shadow. Contextual integration. You have a real-world use case. So, for example, with a plane, they had to secretly get all their models in whatever way. This is a simpler example where you're using 2D images. Any real-world application, the content comes from outside. You need a workflow for getting it in. And usually, if the stuff you do in VR is meaningful, you want to get it back out somehow. This is an example of how you do that in this kind of creative environment. And sort of abstractly thinking here, temporal integration means seeing something you did before or preparing something to do later. And so that was saving and loading. One interesting thing was having a facilitator outside VR. So sometimes you want the people in VR to just do the stuff and not have to worry about or even know about what the progression of activities is going to be. So an outside VR interface for controlling what people do. This was a very interesting video here. So this is an example of an activity that was authored in VR, and it's a kind of simple, but it's illustrating some physical principles. So like you're bouncing balls, and there's a distribution that's created in the way that you might find in a science museum, where you have like tennis balls illustrating a normal distribution. And this activity tells you what to do, but you can also ignore what it tells you to do and do something else. But if you do follow the instructions, then you'll get this distribution forming. And the real important idea about this is, how do you create all this content? Everyone's running into the content problem, right? You can't have developers create all the content. You wouldn't want publishers to have to create all the content in books. In the same way, people have to be able to use tools, which would be like word processors, to create exercises. I wanted to use the bouncy balls, but we only have the fruit cannon, so that is this is an interesting example, I think, of another form of integration between inside and outside VR. I'm just going to show one version of it. It's a tracked tablet in space, and you can see how the person outside VR can see into VR, and people inside VR can see outside. And that was pretty fun and very effective. Skipping forward. Let's do this. So I'm just going to run really quickly through a study. Does this really work? It's cool to visualize the direction of the field in space or whatever, but does it actually have a learning benefit? So I wanted to actually compare 2D and VR, right? So did that. Other people did similar stuff, but not in VR. The experiment design was to compare 2D and 3D as directly as possible. So we had two activities so that we could sort of have each participant do one in VR and one in 2D and counterbalance the order, so it wasn't an ordering effect and all that stuff for experiment design. So this is called target hitting, and because it's a direct comparison with 2D, it's a desk scale, which is so they're not in the middle of it, because we wanted it to be as analogous as possible to the 2D experience. The second one, so they have to place charges in space to make this beam of charges end up at a particular point. And this is another activity where they're having they have to match field lines, so they have a given configuration and they have to create a configuration that leads to that same configuration. So just to sort of illustrate specifically how this mapping works, you kind of have the controller in space, or you have the pen on the screen, and that is creating this kind of a mapping between VR and 2D. So VR has immersion, stereo display, head movement. 2D doesn't. We have this direct manipulation because we're touching the screen, touching the thing directly, even if it's 2D. Okay, so results. There were good results for one game. So for the game, the target hitting game, we actually saw a significantly better learning game in VR. They were taking a test in 2D. They were all basically taking the same multiple choice test so that we could really compare the results side by side. And they did better, and that was very exciting. These are all the things I contributed in my thesis. Some of them you didn't really see. So this framework, some tools, the reality integration framework, experimental results, and then this was the avatar experiment that you just got a flavor of, which said that you really can use this kind of interaction in VR realistically for multiple people interact. And you can try that out back there, because we brought two systems, and we'll have an expert that will guide you through learning some physics. So please check it out. We need to continue to understand when VR is better, continue to develop an understanding of how people explore so that we can support that as well as possible. And authoring experiences in VR is very important for scaling. And these are all the lovely people that contributed to the work that you saw. And couldn't have done it without them. And thanks to my community and the sponsors and stuff. So I'll leave these people there. Great, so that's it for now. I hope we have some time for questions. 5 minutes? Okay, cool. Questions? Right there. Yeah.
So for the learning aspect of it, I understand why you would keep the user seeing from a third-person point of view as a headset, but for the collaborative aspect and the communicative aspect, you explore other options as opposed to just seeing other users as just a headset.
Yeah, so the real idea for me was there's an entire field of psychology which explores the effects of using different kinds of avatars. I mean, people have done studies where they found that you become less biased if you become a female or a dark-skinned person, for example. And all that stuff. It's like really great and really important for VR, but not something that I I wanted to separate out the effect and study the stuff that I was interested in. In the future, it's certainly very important to think about this stuff. People have done studies where if you dress up as a scientist, you do better at doing science because you feel, you take on that role. That stuff's, very interesting, very important. But I wanted to, just prove out the feasibility of doing it in a really minimal way. And actually, there are some interesting benefits to not having any kind of identity. So, yeah, right there.
How soon do you expect that this will be part of a student's actual college experience?
So some people will have that experience this fall at MIT. Believe it or not, it's actually moving a lot faster in China than it is here. The stuff I've seen that they've done is very much a direct mapping from the textbook experience. So they sort of just take the diagrams and put them in 3D. I don't think that itself is actually revolutionizing very much stuff. When you think about the cost, so for example, the previous speaker mentioned that you can actually fill a room. So, when basically in the 90s, universities would fill their labs with computers, and this is really not more expensive than a computer with a nice monitor. And so I do expect that universities will be able to afford that, and it'll just be a matter of time till they figure out what kind of content is most impactful and actually are able to make it. And that's one thing I'm hoping to contribute to. The physics stuff, for example, if anyone wants to sort of help with that, it's going to be open source on that end of things. Front to back, Jeff.
So I'm wondering if you see any potential for doing testing and exams within VR, or do you think it's mainly just for study?
That's a really, really excellent question. The question was, could people actually do their tests in VR? Yes, I think that's actually a really important change in paradigm. It was really kind of artificial to say we should really be testing people on multiple choice tests. It's only because that's something that people buy and something you compare with 2D. But really, I think it makes a ton of sense to say, okay, here's the question: which direction does this vector point, right? That way, right? You can express that in 3D and in space. It'd be difficult on paper either to ask the question or get that kind of answer. So yeah, I think that's really important. Okay.
This looks like a lot of fun. I'm going to play this on my iPad, and I'm showing it online. Is this public? Any of these experiences that you're showing?
So we haven't published them yet. I mean, it was there's always that little extra step to publish the stuff, and we haven't done that yet. But now that I'm graduating, hope that I can. And you can reach out, especially the physics stuff. We are interested in having people try it out, and ideally also contribute to its development. So certainly reach out to me. I failed to put any kind of contact information up here. Scott G. Wald is my handle, and you can, of course, find my full name in the announcement for this event, and you find that easily. Yep.
You mentioned the content problem, like the difficulty of creating content that you can then put together, and it seemed like you were going to say something about that, or that you were working on that.
Yeah, so I gave so the question was, how am I approaching or solving the content creation problem? So one of the interesting things about that example I showed where there were balls dropping and there was this activity with instructions was that was made entirely in VR. I actually tried that out with some high school teachers, seeing if they could make it. We only had a half hour with them, but they actually succeeded at making somewhat interesting activities based on that engine which supports collisions and gravity. So let's see.
I think on that same line, have you, similar to stuff that Jonah was doing in Unity,
have
you thought about taking not just a world building perspective, but an educational tool building perspective, so that teachers are able to create their own curriculum right in VR, bring it in, like set a couple of paradigms. So like I want to teach physics, or I want to teach math, or I want to teach history, or
Yep.
whatever it is. Know your content and start actually building.
Yep.
Because I'd imagine it's going to be very hard, depending on the subject you want to make, for someone to make it so that we can actually get those type of tools right at our
The question is, could environments be made for teachers to make content in different areas? That's absolutely the idea we're going for. So that this example had a mechanics simulation, which will give you a certain ability to illustrate things like parabolic arcs and, like you said, normal distributions. But I very much see an ecosystem of simulations upon which people can quickly build content that they can use. I think about copy machines and stuff, transparencies, whiteboards. There.
I was wondering about when you're combining the constructivism approach and the creation approach together with the balls. I was wondering if you had any better results in the creation space, if people were able to understand the system better and had interesting ideas, and if you had any projects that were kind of furthering that approach, combining a constructivism approach and a creation space together to guide a user to learn something, but able to kind of be more free.
So I think there is a really interesting, question was combining constructivism and creation in VR, and I think that there is this really interesting crossover when you make a platform that allows, a teacher to make content, the same platform allows a student to make content, and so the question is then only how you structure the interaction in class. And I very much think that, for example, that could be a good way to run a class is make an activity for your neighbor and then have your neighbor do your activity, so swap with them. That can be really interesting. And sort of that generativity in the environment that allows you to make more and more stuff, more complicated stuff, etc. That's really interesting really important for people to learn more stuff and stay engaged. Until now, it's mostly been experimented with for learning to program. Like Scratch is a great example, so trying to learn to program. But here you could be trying to learn science, and then do sort of the same kind of thing.
On the research side, I'm curious about how you define and prove that students learn better in Sweden. Do you use survey to ask them whether they enjoy themselves more, or do you design tests?
The question was how do you measure people, quantify the difference between VR and non-VR learning? So in the example that I gave, basically it's very hard. It's very hard, and in the example I gave, I just did this, very specific group of people and a very specific kind of 2D, 3D comparison, and tested them on a multiple choice test. It's certainly very important and interesting to see that people are differently engaged, but I wanted to have a quantifiable result about their learning, and that was how I did it. It's tough. So I plan to scale up a little bit and continue to, if you really do a bunch of ER, then you can compare outcomes in a class. It's obviously a lot of work to see if the people do better, and you have to have a lot of students to say okay, that group really did better on the final exam. But that's ultimately where you have to go if you want those kinds of solid results. Had one back there.
Last question.
So Mitch gave some feedback on that first painting application. Seemed excited about it. There's a few people in Fluid Interfaces, our group, that are starting to look at sort of a similar model, at first with HoloLens. But I think it's a very interesting direction to go to see if you can bring that into VR. Okay, cool.
Right, thank you, Scott. So if you do want to check out Scott's stuff, the line's going to start over there. I think there might still be some pizza left. So we had one demo had technical difficulties, had to pull out, and Infinite Stores is over here, and then Strive over here on the left. So it's 4 demos, a whole lot of people. What was that?
Autodesk Live demo. Building architecture.
Okay, so Autodesk Live demo building architecture. So that's what's going on over here in the left corner. And so afterwards, so we got to be out of here by 9, I believe. And so then after, we're going to go down to Firebrand Saints. But anyway, go Hound. Thank you for coming out.
You're going to be out at 9?
I don't know. Is it 9? Is it 10? My brain does not work. It's 10.